If you've been paying attention to pop culture in the last few years, you'll notice the big emphasis on nostalgia from the 1980s, with the recent Wonder Woman 1984 or the smash hit series on Netflix, Stranger Things. Hollywood is riding the wave of 80s nostalgia, but today, let's rewind back to September of 1993. Richard Linklater wrote and directed Dazed and Confused, which covers the last day of school for a group of kids as they just hang out in 1976 Austin, Texas. The movie is the ultimate chill movie, and since its release, it's gained a cult following. Today on Nameless Reviews, we're going to take a look at 10 things you didn't know about Dazed and Confused. Box office flop. In the years since its release, Dazed and Confused has gained a huge cult following, spawned some of the most quotable lines in history, and launched the careers of many famous Hollywood actors, but at the time of its release, it was considered a major flop. Dazed and Confused was released in 1993 and had a production budget of only $6.9 million, and it made only $8 million at the box office. Richard Linklater had pushed hard to get the movie made, and had constant disputes with the studio during filming. However, the film received generally positive reviews at the time, and the soundtrack for the movie, something that we'll talk about here in a moment, sold extremely well, and the movie became a hit on VHS and Laserdisc. Now, over the years, many people not only look back fondly on the movie, but it's essentially reached cult classic status and remains one of the most rewatchable movies ever made. The movie is ranked on many lists as one of the best movies of all time, and famed director Quentin Tarantino included Dazed and Confused in his list of the top 10 greatest films of all time. The music was 1/6 the budget. Now, one of the more iconic things to come from Dazed and Confused was the soundtrack. The movie is set to music from the 1970s, and every single song is iconic. From the opening track of Aerosmith's Sweet Emotion to Bob Dylan, Foghat, Black Sabbath, Lynyrd Skynyrd, ZZ Top, Alice Cooper, and Rick Derringer, not to mention Ted Nugent, Nazareth, and Kiss, the soundtrack is badass, and it's something that I listened to over and over when I was young. I would credit this for getting me interested in classic rock when I was younger, legit. Now, what's crazy about all of this is that the music was so important to director Richard Linklater that 1/6 of the film's $6.9 million budget was spent to secure the rights to the music. When Linklater set out to make the movie, he knew that music would be a big part of its success, so they made sure to hire relative unknown actors and actresses, and then splurged on movie rights. Now, what's interesting though is that the movie is titled Dazed and Confused after the Led Zeppelin song of the same title. Linklater approached the surviving members of Led Zeppelin back in 1993 to get permission to use their song Rock and Roll in the movie, as he wanted to have a Led Zeppelin song in the movie. Now, initially, both Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones agreed to give permission, but Robert Plant refused and the idea was scrapped. So basically, they paid out the ass for music for the movie, got a ton of iconic songs on the soundtrack, but couldn't get the one band to sign off on it that the entire movie was named over. Young ensemble cast. One of the things that most people who haven't seen Dazed and Confused in a while forget is how jam-packed with stars this cast was. But at the time of filming, very few of these actors and actresses had any experience at all, and they were all far from household names. The movie features a young Ben Affleck, Mila Jovovich, Cole Hauser, Anthony Rapp, Parker Posey, and Matthew McConaughey, all of whom would go on to have massively successful careers in their own right. They were all in this movie before they were famous. Now, Wiley Wiggins, the actor cast to play one of the main characters, Mitch Kramer, didn't necessarily have a big acting career after this, but he did become somewhat famous running a video gaming festival called the Fantastic Arcade. Even a young Renee Zellweger makes an appearance in the movie in a blink or you miss it walk-by scene. She goes uncredited as an extra in the movie, but it's crazy how many up-and-coming actors and actresses were in the movie. Now, what's even crazier, though, is the people that tried out for roles in the movie that didn't get them. Claire Danes, Elizabeth Berkley, Ashley Judd, Brendan Fraser, Jon Favreau, the guy who directed Iron Man, and Vince Vaughn were all considered for roles in the movie, but did not make the cut. Filming direction. Richard Linklater is known for his laid-back coming-of-age films that have strong character focuses, and they're usually typically pretty light on plot. Now, to make movies like this succeed, he has a number of things that he does as a director to help his actors get into their roles. Now, in Dazed and Confused, with the movie being a tribute to the mid-1970s, and music being such a heavy focus for the movie, he gave each one of the actors in the film their own mixtape with music from the 1970s that he thought would help them get into their role as that specific character. Now, another of the things that Linklater did might surprise some. One of the early scenes in the movie is a hazing scene with the new seniors tracking down all of the incoming freshmen and paddling them with some homemade paddles. Now, these paddles were actually made by the individual actors who carried them. Richard Linklater wanted them to personalize their paddles, and so they were given free rein to decorate them as they wanted. Probably the most notorious and fitting of the paddles is that carried by Fred O'Banion, played by Ben Affleck. All I have to say is, if this was a thing in the 1970s where seniors beat the shit out of incoming freshmen with paddles, I am glad civilization moved past that by the time I got into high school. Underage cast marriages. Now, one of the weirdest series of events that occurred during the filming of Dazed and Confused was the relationship and then brief marriage between Shawn Andrews, the actor that played Kevin Pickford, and Milla Jovovich, the actress that played his in-movie girlfriend Michelle. Now, what makes this a little less of a heartwarming story and a little bit more cringe is that he was 21 and she was 16 at the time. They eloped to Las Vegas to get married, but as soon as her mother found out, the marriage was annulled by Jovovich's mother. Now, the relationship was broken off at that point, and Milla Jovovich has gone on to have a huge modeling and acting career. Shawn Andrews hasn't been quite so successful, but he was still acting into the 2010s, so give him that. Drama on the set. The relationship between Shawn Andrews and Milla Jovovich certainly threw a wrench into the filming. According to the other actors, Shawn Andrews and Milla Jovovich were inseparable during filming, and they did not get along well with the other actors on set. Shawn Andrews in particular was the center of quite a bit of drama. While most of the cast got along and hung out off set, Andrews was combative with co-star Jason London, who played Randall Pink Floyd. This got as far as a fist fight at one point, and director Richard Linklater had to break up the fight between the two. Now, this led to a number of changes in the script, writing out Kevin Pickford from the ending of the film and reducing his role overall. It also opened the door for a fan favorite to enter the film and change history. The casting of Matthew McConaughey. Now, if you weren't aware, Dazed and Confused is Hollywood star Matthew McConaughey's very first movie, and the story of how he was cast has become legendary. Matthew McConaughey did not audition in the traditional way for the film, but rather made it into his first movie by chance, and of course that changed Hollywood history. Now, one Thursday night, casting director Don Phillips was hanging out at the hotel bar at the beginning of filming. In walks a 23-year-old film student from the University of Texas at Austin, Matthew McConaughey, with a blonde on his arm, and then he starts drinking at the bar with his date. Now, the bartender, who was a school friend of Matthew McConaughey, tells him that the guy sitting down at the other end of the bar is Don Phillips, the man that did the casting for Fast Times at Ridgemont High. McConaughey decides to walk down and talk to him, and the two end up drinking all night and getting so drunk that they get kicked out of the bar by management. Now, McConaughey also ditched his date, giving her money to get a cab so he could stay and hang out with Phillips. At the end of the night, Don Phillips tells Matthew McConaughey to show up at the casting office the next day, that he might be able to get him a small role in the film. McConaughey shows up and does a quick audition.
Hey man, whose car is this?
You know Bobby? Hey man.
Hey, what's up? How's it going?
Say man, you got a joint?
No, you want?
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
And guess what? Matthew McConaughey is cast as Wooderson. Now, it's a very small role in the movie that amounts to nothing more than a glorified extra, at least when he was cast, but everyone on set was so blown away at Matthew McConaughey's charisma and his skill in front of a camera, and with all the fighting and drama surrounding Shawn Andrews, they changed much of the movie and expanded Wooderson's character. All right. Almost as impressive as the casting of Wooderson is the story of his first scene. Richard Linklater and Matthew McConaughey gave an interview to Newsweek where they described that first scene that they filmed, which happened to be the drive-in at the burger joint where Wooderson invited the intellectual characters to the Moon Tower for the party, specifically inviting Marissa Ribisi's redheaded Cynthia Dunn character. Now, before the filming of the scene, Linklater pulled McConaughey aside and tells him that he wants him to improvise the scene. His first movie scene ever, by the way. Linklater tells McConaughey, It's the last day of school, and Wooderson's probably already been with the cheerleader or the popular girl. Do you think he'd go for the redheaded intellectual? And what if he tried to pick up on her? McConaughey told him, "Give me 30 minutes, I'll come back and we'll film it." And this is what we got.
All right.
Oh, Christ.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
Cool. You heard about the party being busted, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Not to worry. There's a new fiesta in the making as we speak. It's out at the Moon Tower. Full kegs. Everybody's gonna be there. You ought to go.
Okay.
Okay, we'll be there.
Okay.
Say you need a ride?
No, I got my own car. Thanks.
Yeah, well listen, you ought to ditch the two geeks you're in the car with now and get in with us, but that's alright. We'll worry about that later. I will see you there. Alright?
Bye.
I love those redheads, man.
I know you.
Now, when asked why he came up with all right, McConaughey explained a little bit about how he saw Wooderson. He said, "So I was sitting in the car, nervous because I was about to have my first acting scene and I was improvising it. I thought, who is my man? Who's my man? I've been listening to this Live Doors album where Jim Morrison barks out between two songs, all right. I didn't know what it meant, so I'm like, okay, Wooderson, I'm about rock and roll, weed, cars, and women. I got my car, I'm listening to Nugent's Stranglehold, and I'm high. And then there's the woman. I got 3 out of 4. All right. I figured I was batting 750, and so that's where the 3 all rights were about." Now, what I always find nuts about this story is that it really tells you a little bit about why Matthew McConaughey became as successful as he did. The way he gets into his roles is one of the reasons he's considered one of the best actors doing it. Livin'. Another iconic part of the movie almost didn't happen, and it had its origins in tragedy. During the filming of Dazed and Confused, Matthew McConaughey was given an expanded role as he was showing that he was extremely charismatic and up to the task, but his father tragically passed away during the filming. Matthew McConaughey's father was a man named James McConaughey, and he was a former NFL player who later became an oil businessman. Now, when he died, Matthew left the production temporarily to arrange and attend his father's funeral, and during this time, production on Dazed and Confused basically stopped. Linklater and McConaughey had a fairly deep conversation about his father and his passing, and that's actually what inspired the live-in speech that Wooderson would give towards the end of the film. So one of Wooderson's more iconic lines comes from tragedy: lawsuits. As the film gained cult status, Richard Linklater faced some odd backlash to the film. In October of 2004, 3 former classmates of Richard Linklater from high school in Texas filed a defamation lawsuit against him. Now, in the lawsuit, they claimed that they were the basis for the characters in the film and that he didn't get their permission to use their likeness or their names. Now, of course, these men were named Bobby Wooderson, Andy Slater, and Richard Floyd, sharing last names with 3 of the main characters in the movie. Now, the lawsuit was filed in New Mexico, as the statute of limitations was over in Texas to file it, but the case was dismissed and it was never settled. Certainly a really weird and odd legacy for the film. So that's it. 10 things you might not know about the cult classic movie Dazed and Confused. You can check out my review of the movie on the channel as well. I'll have that video linked in the description of this video. But what did you think of my list? Did you learn anything? Let me know in the comments of the video, or if you know something I didn't put in here, let's see it. Also, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This is my new YouTube channel, and getting started is always slow with YouTube, and so your interaction with the channel, your subscription, your comments, and your likes all help these videos reach more people. Guys, thank you for watching, and until next time, peace out.